Sorry, I'm just being silly. Hey guys, it's me, Matt. In case you hadn't noticed. Yeah, I am just here doing a little catch-up video, and this is my 6th time trying to record this. Anyway, but yeah, I just got back from Los Angeles and the American premiere of Godzilla Minus One. I got my boy here, and I've even got my ticket here, and it's even got a bunch of my friends autographed it. Ooh, YouTube thumbnail. Yeah, just a couple of my friends here signed that, and yay, it made me really happy. I just, felt very gauche to ask like the bigs, like the director and stuff to sign it. That felt a little gauche, especially because he's being pulled in so many different directions. Anyway, I'm rambling. Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the movie. I'm gonna do a non-spoiler part, and then I'm gonna do a little bit of spoilers. Okay, and I will let you know when I'm gonna do spoilers, so you can just stop watching the video. Don't yell at me. Or yell at me, I don't care. And I don't monetize these videos, so I don't care how much of it you watch. But yeah, so yeah, first off, the red carpet was amazing. We actually got to walk the red carpet, me and Kasten. It was super, super cool. I really appreciate my friends at Toho for facilitating that. They're all super awesome. I'm really flattered by the folks who were cheering us as we were walking up the red carpet. Yay! I'm actually blushing thinking about it. Sorry, yeah, the Godzilla theme going. So, I guess that's my cue to really talk about the movie. The movie was, in the shortest way I can say, the shortest amount of words, it was extremely striking. It was striking as a film. And in some ways, somewhat similar, kind of in theme and in vibe, not just to 1954, but really to the, let me move my new Biolatte, my Super S7 Biolatte. Very similar in vibe to the Shigeru Kayama Godzilla novellas. You can get these, off like Amazon or whatever. And these are the novellas written by Shigeru Kayama, who wrote the original drafts, the story concepts for Godzilla and Godzilla Raids Again, the first two Godzilla movies. And there's some interesting parallels with those novellas and and this film, and Godzilla Minus One. Again, it was striking how good this movie looked. It truly had a Hollywood feel to it, even though, if you really think about it, it was fairly conservatively made. The budget was, I have no idea what the budget was. Maybe it was 10 million, maybe it was 15 million, as opposed to an American blockbuster, which is like 100, 200 million, not counting marketing. So yeah, and this movie looked really good. Yamazaki has a background as a special effects developer, a special effects artist, a VFX artist, and he has really gotten to put his chops on display here. He's been doing this for a while. He's been a big proponent of increasing the quality of Japanese VFX in order to try to stand alongside American effects. And honestly, as far as I'm concerned, this movie looked as good as a lot of American blockbusters personally. I mean, a lot of American blockbusters also farmed out to these like VFX mills, where they underpay a bunch of visual effects artists to crank something out and not given hardly anywhere near enough time to actually make it look as good as they want it to look. Whereas with this movie, it was really clear that's like, even with such a small budget, the team was really working very hard at it because they wanted it to look as good as it could. Personally, I'm always going to have a soft spot for rubber suits. I'm really glad they're still making those Godzilla Fest short films with suits, with the monster suits. But if this is what it takes to get this genre to an international audience and finally get it some damn respect, I guess that's what has to happen. But but still, again, it's... And another thing, another non-spoilery thing is the pacing of it. I really did not feel this movie's length, and it was a good length movie. It was just over 2 hours, I think. Didn't feel the length. Didn't drag. Nothing really. Had just enough time for some stuff to breathe. And right as you were starting to feel like, okay, I haven't seen Godzilla in a little bit, something would happen. And this isn't really a spoiler. There's a lot of Godzilla in this. Like, they want you to drink him in. They want you to admire how cool he is, you know. His big ridiculous spikes and that, you know, that face and everything. And this is a mean Godzilla. He does not like people. He is like, this Godzilla is a bastard, and he can't stand humans, and I respect that in a way, you know, of like, we have this kind of heroic Hollywood Godzilla with the MonsterVerse, and then we have these brutally mean, very destructive Japanese Godzillas, and I'm kind of down for that. So I'm kind of here for that. I'm happy about that. I'm trying to think of any other non-spoilery stuff. The human characters were great. There was a great sense of camaraderie. The acting was really good. There was some stuff that was touched on that have not been touched on in other Godzilla movies. Yamazaki has a very romantic view of post-war Showa Japan. And in this movie, it really feels like he does and doesn't. Like, it's definitely like the brutal side of post-war Japan. And the movie is also doesn't have very nice things to say about the governments of the time. And there's a lot of bitterness the characters have over how they were treated from the war and stuff. And again, I'm not going into too much detail, but like, there's a bitterness that's tinged with optimism, or an optimism tinged with bitterness. So I think there's a couple of different ways to read that. I am kind of whatever. I'm looking at it from the perspective of, it is a very humanist. It's very like, there's a major point to the tagline of like, survive and live, like to survive. And I think that's very important, looking at it from the lens of post-war Japan, a just after World War II Japan lens. I think that's very interesting. But yeah, I think the ultimate point is like, of the movie is like, it's this very intimate story. It's almost like a counterpoint to Shin Godzilla. Whereas Shin Godzilla was this very much like, it's the government bureaucrats. They're all in rooms yelling about what to do about Godzilla, and they have the brightest minds possible coming together to try to stop this monster. And Minus One is like a counterpoint to that. Like, they can't rely on the government, and these characters are kind of on their own. And I don't want to go into too much more than that. Music is also really good too in the movie. Godzilla theme pops up a few times, which is nice, but it kind of has this very ambient music by Naoki. Oh crap, the name fell out of my head. Again, these are the unformed thoughts of a very tired ADHD-addled man who is still kind of reeling from the film that was like last night, and it's like, it's almost 1 a.m. here in Texas after I got home. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about spoilers here. It's going to go right around the 9.5 minute mark. So I'm going to start talking about spoilers. If you don't want to know, don't watch past this point. Okay? Okay. So right off the bat, spoilers, right off the bat, the movie is extremely violent. There is just an insane amount of carnage. I'm also not going to go into like full-on spoilers. I'm going to kind of dance around stuff, but I'm getting more specific because the movie is still like a month out. It's out in Japan right now. It's about half a month before it's out in America in a wide release. The movie is very violent, like I said, more violent than I expected for a lot of Godzilla movies, you know? The main character is clearly wrestling with a lot of PTSD. Him being a kamikaze pilot that basically did not want to die is a very interesting narrative point. And the movie kind of goes out of its way to be like, kamikaze is not the way to do things. Like, you have to live, and you have to, and even if you know, you have to live, and it's very, very not like I've talked with a couple of people about this aspect of it, but there's these characters who are having to fight Godzilla. These are all post-war Japanese. They're now civilians. Not many of them are in the military. The military's basically been dismantled right after the war. And they basically have this whole thing where they're like, we're going to use these skills that we have picked up from... Sorry, I'm having all these problems with my phone. We're going to use these skills we got in the war to now fight Godzilla. And that's very interesting. I've had some people say that oh, well, they're getting to fight the war again and this time win. And it's like, I don't know. They make it clear over and over again in the movie how terrible the war was. There's a young character who says like, man, I wish the war had lasted a little longer so I could have gotten in there. And the main character grabs him and says, no, you don't mean that. You cannot mean that. You don't know what it was like. There is a big surprise at the beginning of the movie, I will say. I'm not using specifics, but I don't know. It's something that I think some people may not be expecting. So, you know, I don't want to get too specific about it, but it's something to think about, and it's very cool. It's a very cool sequence. So, yeah, and there's also, like, again, this Godzilla, like, he is brutal. He has certain physicality aspects to him that is really, really, really cool. It's the first time we get to see Godzilla regenerate in real time. Regenerate. Like, I don't think we've ever really seen that. Closest thing is maybe Shin Godzilla. And you see his body morphing a bit. But yeah, I'm trying to think of any other little things. There's a really cool, like, Godzilla movies are kind of known for their weird super weapons. And there is a bit of a super weapon in this movie towards the end, which is kind of cool. It's not like a super weapon, but it definitely is something I don't think existed. But it's very cool. Yeah, and just another thing that somebody pointed out to me, I think Steve Rifle was the one who pointed this out to me, was this movie, it's supposed to be post-war Japan. And this is when America was occupying Japan, there's no Americans. Like, Americans are referenced in the movie, but there are, to my knowledge, no Americans. And maybe that was a budget thing. They didn't want to have to wrangle a bunch of Americans up, and they knew this was going to play overseas, and they didn't want, like, a bunch of Americans who weren't, like, professional actors, which is something that Godzilla movies are kind of known for, is basically going out to Yokota Air Base and rounding up a bunch of Americans to plug into their film, a bunch of white people to plug in their films. Because, yeah, I mean, that's not to say there aren't gaijin actors in Japan. Kamen Rider Black Sun has this young black actor whose name is escaping me, but he is amazing, and I really want to see him in more stuff. But I think in order to represent a proper American occupying force, they would have had to have had, like, a lot of actors, and I don't know, that may have been a budget thing, that may have been a logistics thing. It would have been nice to have seen, like, maybe some Americans and Japanese working together to fight Godzilla. Maybe they could have done that a little bit. I don't know. That's my one. That's probably my one big criticism, is that I would have liked to have seen that. But I get, from a logistical standpoint, it's hard to cast gaijin actors in Japanese films. I think those are some of the nuances of the nuance, the pain in the ass nuances of the Japanese film industry. Because I bet if you were to suggest that to Yamazaki, he probably would have gone for it. But again, it's like, you know, making this movie for a tiny budget and a breakneck schedule. Breakneck for American standards. So, you know, I think for what it is, though, and for this kind of alternate reality version of the events of post-war Japan, especially because, like, an atomic bomb does go off, like, the tests in the Pacific are happening, and they happen before they happen. I gotta go and look at my timeline of, like, exactly when they were testing nukes, but it's implied that the Marshall Island test happens, and it happens, the Castle Bravo test, and it happens, like, way earlier than it's supposed to. And it's like this, that's like where the timeline diverges or something. Kind of want to watch this as like a double feature with Oppenheimer. the fuck around and find out double feature. But yeah, I mean, there's probably more I could talk about, more specific spoilery things, but there are some things I just don't want to give away because it's just like, it's a really enjoyable film. It moves at a good clip. There was a lot of tears in the audience. Definitely a couple of our a couple of my friends definitely had some tears. Cass had some tears. First time I've seen her cry in a movie. There's a lot that I want to talk about more, but I'm just like, I'm still kind of in the afterglow of the film. I've got my, like I said, we all went to dinner afterwards, me and a couple of my longtime kaiju fan friends, like Chris Jahangir and Mary Bear and a couple other folks that I've known for a while. I can't read everyone's audio signatures here. But my brain is starting to go because I'm also real tired after all the travel. But it was a really special experience all around, and maybe that's colored my perceptions a little bit. I don't know. I'm going to sit on this movie for a little while. I am curious to see how this will be ranked in the pantheon of Godzilla movies. Personally, I think I enjoyed it a little more than Shin Godzilla. GMK is still my favorite Godzilla movie, like, hands down. I don't think it's ever really going to be supplanted. This is pretty good, though. Like, this is up there. This is really up there. But GMK is still my favorite, even though, and the director said specifically that that GMK was a big inspiration, which was very cool. I'm sure Hope Kaneko-san knows that. And it's definitely, obviously, hugely inspired by the original film. I'd be curious to know if Yamazaki's read the original novellas. Because the original novellas, they have so much empathy in them. They have so much, like, raw emotion in them compared to the original film. And the original two Godzilla films, like, they're not, like, totally stiff films, but they don't have the sheer volume of emotion that are in these novellas. I think Kayama was a very empathetic man. I think he had a lot of empathy. And he definitely had a lot to say about not just the atomic bombings, but also the Japanese and their role in World War II, this very destructive role of, let's be honest, of aggressors in the war. And while that specifically is not called out in this film, the abuse of the Japanese population by the Japanese government in World War II is definitely on display. It's like, hey, in a lot of ways, a lot of the Japanese population were also victims of their government, of this pretty fascist, well, let's be honest and say it was a fascist government. And there's a lot to unpack there, but I've been talking for almost 20 minutes. Really excited for you guys to see the movie. I'm heading to Japan in a couple of weeks, and I gotta get prepared for that, but I am gonna probably go to bed. So I'll do the thing. Thanks, guys, and thank you again to Toho, the good people at Toko, the good people at Toho, like Emma and AJ and Allie, and you guys are awesome. Yeah, and I'll catch up with y'all later.